Howdy, and welcome to Chapter 2. In Chapter 2, we're going to be talking about identifying instructional goals using front-end analysis. In the last chapter, we talked about instructional design in general, and we looked at the Dick and Carey model that we'll be studying throughout the semester. Chapter 2 is the first step of the Dick and Carey model. And here is where it falls on the diagram. Okay, so the first step, we assess needs and we identify goals. The purpose of instructional design is to help produce a desirable change. This change could be an improvement in attitudes, it could be an increase in knowledge, or it could be an upgrade in skills for employees. So whenever we do training, we expect some kind of change. So think of some examples of a desired change. Such as perhaps better customer service. That's a desired change that could result from a customer service training. An increase in sales could result from increasing the skills of the sales staff. Okay. So an early step in the design process is to identify the change, whatever this change is that we want. And to look at the variables. So first we have to identify the desired change. Then we need to identify who wants the change, who will this change affect, and in what environment should this change occur. And this is what is determined to be front-end analysis, which we'll be talking about for the rest of this chapter. Here's a quote I really like from Major and Pipe. Solutions to problems are like keys and locks. They don't work if they don't fit. I mean, this just makes sense, right? So something that's even worse than having a training program with no instruction is if we have instruction with no training problem to solve. Okay, so that's like the key going into the wrong lock, so to speak. So that's why an essential first step in instructional design is confirming whether or not an instructional design solution is a good fit with the problem. So identifying instructional goals. What are instructional goals? Instructional goals are just clear statements of behaviors that learners are to demonstrate as a result of the instruction. So it's a description of capabilities learners are to achieve or what they will be able to do as a result of specific instruction. So it's the behavior. If we think about, we're going to do a training and the employee goes back to work, that's called the performance context. Once they go back to the performance context, what behaviors will they be performing that show that they learned what we taught them? So it's all about the behaviors that result from instruction. Dick and Carey state on page 19, the most critical event in the instructional design process is identifying the instructional goal. This is an important statement that the authors make, and it's a huge, strong statement, the most critical event. So why do you think the authors make this statement? And what might happen if we don't identify an instructional goal? I mean, if you think about it, we run the risk of planning instructional solutions for needs that really don't exist. And I think before we talked about how technology has to follow design. Well, design has to follow the problem, okay, in this particular case. So there are a few different approaches to identifying instructional goals. The first is the SME approach, or subject matter expert. And if you don't know what a subject matter expert is, it's a person who has a great deal of expertise in whatever the training is that we're doing. And an instructional design team would normally have an SME on it because as a trainer or designer, we don't know everything about everything. So we need to bring someone in who's an expert just to make sure that our content is accurate and that it's timely and relevant. For instance, in one of my first training jobs, I was asked to train forklift drivers. And the first thing I thought of, besides what's a forklift, is I don't know anything about how to drive a forklift. I don't, and it's safety kind of issue. So I immediately went out and got someone who could be my SME and work alongside me. Okay. And sometimes when we approach instructional goals, if we're looking just to the SME, we could be assuming that the students or learners need to learn what the SME knows. And what the SME knows could be limited. So we could be limiting ourselves there if we just look at that particular approach. The second one is content outline. In this approach, the lack of knowledge or skill is assumed to be caused by students not learning the right type or amount of content. So we're just saying that whatever they've learned isn't the right amount or type. Okay. Thirdly, administrative mandate, and this is where we have laws and boards and agencies that mandate that certain training have to take place. Okay. Lastly, performance technology is where instructional goals are set in response to problems and opportunities within an organization. And this is the HRD approach to this, because we are looking for problems and opportunities, and then we're setting goals in response to that. Okay, so front-end analysis is a term for the processes we use to arrive at valid instructional goals. And we do this by evaluating the needs and identifying alternatives to meeting those needs, because not every need indicates the training should occur. In fact, we should eliminate most everything before we choose training, because training is very costly and very resource intensive for organizations. So we should be looking at it very carefully and making sure that's in effect the right approach. Here's the chart. This is in the book of how we conduct front-end analysis. So we would first conduct a performance analysis. We'll talk about that in a minute. We would say, is there a performance problem that can be solved by instruction? If the answer is no, then we choose some other solution. It could be that we need better resources, or there's something lacking in the environment, or it could be that we have the wrong people in the wrong jobs and they're not able to do whatever the goal is. So in either case, we would choose something else. So if there is a problem that can be solved by instructions, we conduct a needs assessment. We want to determine whether a gap exists between what we want to see and what's happening. And then sometimes we'll do a job analysis. It depends on what kind of problem it is. And then after that, we identify the instructional goals for the training. So a performance analysis consists of several steps. And if you look at this, it's just a kind of problem-solving analysis. So it's an analytical analysis used to locate, analyze, and correct job performance problems. Okay, so it identifies and clarifies problems and causes of problems and solutions, and determines, does the solution involve training or some other activity? So here again at this step, we're still asking that same question. So it looks a lot just like problem solving. We would identify the problem, we've gathered data, and then we have to identify the root cause, because sometimes we can identify a problem such as the sales are too low. Okay, well that's a problem, but we have to say what's causing it. So we have to dig deeper. We have to keep asking at every level, what's causing that, what's causing that, what's causing that, until we get down to the root cause. And then we use data to verify this. We identify solutions and implement the solutions, and then monitor the progress. So the main purpose is just to acquire information in order to verify problems and identify solutions. So once we do that, we move on to needs assessment, which is also called discrepancy analysis. So at this point, what we're doing is we're looking at what's currently happening versus what we want to happen. So we look at the desired status. What is it I want to happen? I mean, this could be I want sales of $100,000 a month. I want employees to performance evaluation to be above average. I want customer satisfaction ratings to be 9 out of 10. Whatever that is, that's something that the desired state. This is what I would like to see happening. And then I look at what's actually happening. If I say I want sales to be $100,000 a month and they're $30,000 a month, I'm going to say there's a gap there. Okay, there's a discrepancy or a need. So we compare the desired to the actual and determine, is there a need? And if there's a need, can that need be solved by training? Okay. Sometimes we move on to a job analysis. And job analysis is really an HR function. It's where we analyze jobs in an organization to determine what tasks people are performing to be successful in a job. And we determine the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities needed to perform those tasks in a particular job. And it becomes really the basis for all HR programs. For instance, we can't hire anybody until we know exactly what the job is and what the knowledge, skills, and abilities are. We can't evaluate performance. In the same way, we can't really do a training program, especially if it's skill-based. Okay, so we have to use this to identify and understand the task employees carry out. And we want to focus on those tasks that contribute to efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction. This is where we'll do the most good with our training. Okay, so we want to say, well, if I focus on improving this particular task, will that lead to efficiency? Okay, or employee satisfaction. And this is especially needed when we have new equipment, machinery, software, or processes being implemented. Okay, let's say a new system for HRIS system, Human Resource Information System, is being adopted. So we would need to do this to see how does that affect the tasks that need to be carried out in HR. Okay, and we don't do this for every situation, just those that involve skills that need to be changed or skills that need to be developed. Could be new skills. Okay, so instructional goals. This is what we would then, after we do all the analysis, we would come up with instructional goals. Book talks about fuzzy goals. So what's a fuzzy goal? A fuzzy goal is just an abstract statement about the internal state of the learner. And it always has these vague words like appreciating, having an awareness of, knowing, how, sensing. These are words that are very vague in nature. For instance, if I said my goal is to have my learner appreciate classical music, what does that mean? You can see how vague that is. So when we do goals, we have to use strong words. We have to use strong words. We have to have an indication of what learners would be doing if they achieved the goal. So if I said I want learners to appreciate classical music, I could, I'm making this up, maybe have something like learners will be able to differentiate between genres of classical music and classify music according to composer and time period. Okay, because that's something that the learner would be doing and I can observe it. It has to be observable behavior, okay, in order to be a good goal and not be fuzzy and not be vague. Okay. So instructional goals describe successful learner performance. And when you have a fuzzy goal, you can fix it by going through this process. Okay, so we write the instructional goal down. Like the learners will appreciate classical music. And then we generate a list of all the behaviors the learner should be able to perform. So we kind of brainstorm and think, visualize what would it look like if this person were doing this, and we list all that. Then in the third step, we analyze that and select those that best reflect the goal, and then we incorporate them into a statement. Okay, so it's just a good way to kind of think through a fuzzy goal, because if we have a fuzzy goal, it'd be really hard to develop training. How would I train somebody to appreciate classical music if I didn't really know what it meant or what I wanted them to be able to do? Okay, so you kind of get the idea. Complete goal statement has to have these 4 things. We have to describe the learners. I can't just say, people or learners at, I need to say specifically students in music 103. Okay, that would be very specific for the learners. Okay, then I want to describe what the learner will be able to do in the performance context. And these statements never include anything about training. It's not about the training. It's about what they do back on the job. So what learners will be able to do back on the job or in the performance context where they will be actually carrying out what we taught them. We want to describe the performance context and any tools that the learner may have available in the performance context. So here's an example. The pie bakers at the Perfect Pie Company, this is specific about the learners, will bake a perfect pie meeting all established quality control guidelines by following the established recipe and using specified equipment in the Perfect Pie Bakery. Okay, so there's a goal that has all 4 parts to it. So that would be a good goal. Well, that's all there is for Chapter 2. Thank you.